And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How's everyone doing? I'm Keith Williams, your host for The Works. Welcome to this podcast edition. And we've been doing a lot of switcheroos around here because of various reasons. And we're trying to play catch up here. And hopefully that we will get this continuity thing straight in the future. But in the meanwhile, we do have a great guest today. Her name is Amy Carpenter, and she pretty much have a long resume here. Let's see. She's the author of a book called Be Strong, Be Wise, The Young Adult's Guide to Sexual Assault Awareness and Personal Safety. Uh, she's been a psychotherapist and youth advocate for over 25 years, specializes in trauma treatment and assault response. She, in her biography, she mentioned that there's 5 steps to help teens and young adults recuperate themselves from the noise about sex in the media. I'm sorry, I don't know what I got Carpenter from. I don't know what I got Carpenter from. I really do apologize. It's
That's a
Amber McCutcheon.
yes. So
McCutcheon.
you don't have my bio. That is not my, I
That's
mean,
not
similar.
yours.
That is not
Oh,
my bio.
oh my goodness.
It's
You
okay.
I'm really messing up here. I'm really messing up here. This is exactly what I'm talking about here. We had so many people on here that
Yeah.
uh we can't get a lot of this straight for some reason. Uh well, let's say it this way. Let's put it this way. Tell a little bit about who you are and what you do.
We can do that.
Okay. Um,
Do you want to reintroduce? That way you have an easy place to cut.
yeah, so
Or kind of like
apparently,
introduce yourself and then I can introduce after.
okay. Uh, I'm Keith Williams. Welcome to the Works Podcast. And with us today is Amber McCutcheon.
Yes. Thank you, Keith, for having me on the works today. I'm so excited to be able to share my story and really my heart with your listeners. And so I believe I'll just start a little bit about myself. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. I have memories as early as 2. My dad was my perpetrator. And in 2010, I hit a wall, or that's the easiest way to describe it to everyone, where I was going along through life and just not dealing with my abuse wasn't an option anymore. My mom had passed away in January of that year. I still had relationships with my mom and my dad. And at that point in time, when my mom passed away, I was pregnant with our 7th child. We now have 12. And I had always went through, like I kind of tucked it away. I just didn't deal with the things that my dad had done to me. I told my mom when I was 11. And come to find out, like, as I began my healing journey in 2010, I had a greater understanding of why she reacted in the way that she did when I was 11. She told me that everyone had a skeleton in the closet, and that's where it was going to stay at. We weren't going to talk about it ever again. I'm an only child. But in the moment when my heart was crushed because I wanted my mom to be the protector and get me out of this situation, I realized as I began my healing journey in 2010, that still continues today, my mom had been abused by a family member as well. And my grandmother, her mom, was raised in a variety of orphanages, and she would use the phrase, They didn't want a child. They didn't want a child. And she would shake her head. And, and I'm praying and I'm asking God to give me clarity. So I know that it didn't start with my generation, but I wanted to stand in the gap and say, no more. Is this going to be a generational curse upon our family, or something that goes on because others didn't know how to heal, or they didn't choose to heal, because healing is a choice and it is a gift.
Mm.
And so through that, my ministry, Hope, was birthed. So Hope stands for healing our past experiences. We all have past experiences that make us who we are today, for better and for worse. Mine just happens to include being sexually abused as a child. And then I went on to start a nonprofit in 2017 through the ministry. And so I've been a nonprofit since then, under the name Healing Our Past Experiences, where I created a video curriculum that's used around the world to be able to help others overcome our past experiences. It's just really practical. And the fact that it's for the everyday person, it can be done in the privacy of your own home, at your own pace, in your own space, but it also can be facilitated in a group setting where we have churches and homeless shelters and even facilities who are assisting victims of sexual trafficking coming out. They're utilizing the curriculum. And we have individuals who realize that not dealing with their trauma is not working for them anymore, and that they need to overcome, and they just haven't figured out how to do that. And so there's just practical tools in that video curriculum. It's 7 sessions long to be able to help overcome that. And I'm an open book, Keith, so you can ask whatever questions, and I promise you're not gonna stump me or startle me, either way.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about your nonprofit,
Mhm.
your curriculum, that you mentioned.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you talk about in your curriculum?
So in the first session, it's more of an introductory and kind of my story. Anybody who has been betrayed has trust issues, and not everyone who is going to utilize the curriculum gets to have a one-on-one conversation with me, although I do talk to a lot of people. It introduces that, and it gains trust on why, I kind of get it, because a lot of people feel crazy when you've gone through trauma. We've also often been betrayed by people who are close to us. 90% of the time, it's people who have had access to us and have been trusted by what I'll call the gatekeepers, whether it was our parents or our guardians, or sometimes it is the parents or the guardians or the aunts or the uncles that have been the ones to betray the trust of other family members that they betrayed, or that they've trusted in them. And so I kind of like start out with that, and then we identify some steps. Everybody can relate to. One of the visions that God gave me when I was preparing for the curriculum is a vision of 3 glasses. And so, to start out with, all these glasses are absolutely identical. But whenever I presented it, the first glass was just crushed beyond repair. It was just broken. The second glass in the middle was full of things it was never intended to carry, like motor oil and sticks and rocks. And then the third glass on the tray was being used what it was absolutely intended for its purpose. And it's crystal clear, and it was full of water. And I really believe that no matter who we are and what our experiences are, everybody could relate to one of those glasses. You're at just a different place in your life or in your journey of life. And for me, I had felt like that damaged goods, that first glass, for a long time in my life, even though I was a functional member of society and owned my own business and a school board member and all these other things. Like, nobody understood behind the mask. And a lot of people are wearing masks because we don't want to make ourselves vulnerable. We don't want to be hurt over and over again after we've already been betrayed by the very ones that should have been protecting us. And so, that second glass would represent those who have maybe had things put up on them. And that's a lot of forms of fashion. You're carrying things that are not yours to carry. That could be guilt and shame for things that have happened to you, or even things that you've done. But imagine pouring out that glass. And, that's kind of like where you start that healing journey. You're like, okay, I'm no longer going to carry this. And you kind of purge that glass. When that glass is turned upside down, if you can imagine, there's still oil, that crud out of that used motor oil that's still stuck to the inside of the glass. And I really believe that represents the residue, the things that were still a struggle in my life. And so I had to choose to continue a healing journey. Like I said, this still goes on today, but with the right tools. And for that example, you could take some dish detergent and you could go in there and clean that out with the right tools applied to the situation. That glass can be used originally for its creation, its purpose. And you wouldn't know the difference between that last glass that was stunning and clear and transparent and didn't have any secrets than the middle glass when the work is done. So healing is a choice. We talk about that and how it's a gift. And then we start with the foundation of that. And like I lead out with the I am statements. And the curriculum's created in a way that although I'm a believer, God told me that my target audience wasn't just Christian women or Christians in general. So it's put out in a way that like God's truths are there. I didn't just hashtag all of the scriptures, so to say, right? Like I would say the very things that were meant to destroy my life are now being used for my good. Well, that's John 10:10 and Romans 8:28 kind of like mixed up in there. But then when we get to the I am truths, it's all in God's word, but I didn't necessarily make that absolutely part of the curriculum. It is an option for the curriculum. And in God's wisdom, it opened up opportunities for organizations that are non-faith based to be able to utilize the curriculum for their clients. And so we started out with truths of the I am statements and the power of our words, because what we believe is what we become. If we believe that we're that victim, then we're going to stay that victim. But if we believe we're victorious, that I am beautiful and that I'm worthy and that I'm worth setting boundaries for, it's really the foundation of all of the rest of the curriculum, the foundation of your healing to build upon. And then we go in, we'll talk about sexual expressions and how it affects things behind the closed doors. There's a part where we talk about our coping skills in life. There's probably the most powerful session is the one on perpetrators and how they have a plan, understanding their thought process, and that how you didn't have any choice in that. You weren't a co-planner. And that's the information that when I came in contact with, that was probably transformational most in my life. It was where it helped me hand back the guilt and shame that I had carried for a lifetime so far. We also talk about unforgiveness and anger and how to overcome that, and the why behind that, and so there's a lot that's entailed in that, but it's broke down, I would say, in bite-sized sections to where it's not meant to be gone through all in one day. Like I said, you kind of watch one video, you apply what you learn, you use the tools that were given in that, and then you go forward at your own pace to be able to work the tools. My husband is a blacksmith and a mechanic. And, I think with most who have used any kind of tools, when you have the right tools for the right job, for the job, you can get it done more efficiently and more effectively. But if you're just kind of making do with what you got, which is how I felt for a long time in my life, I didn't have the right tools. I would get frustrated. I would get discouraged. I would just want to give up in that. So it's really about putting tools in hands who need help to overcome our past experiences.
So what are some of the type of people that, well, first of all, do people have to come in person to
No, not at all. It's
curriculum?
yeah, so it's on the web. I have a website, and you can put that in the podcast notes. I'll send that to you. But you can go on there. It's actually, you can do a digital download. I have DVD sets as well. And there's also facilitators. Like you can become a facilitator by simply going through it first, being able to navigate, because you can't lead where you're not willing to go. And so for an individual to be able to facilitate groups, you simply have to go through it first and then kind of correspond back and forth with me a little bit. And then you're able to open up either your heart, your home, your church, your workspace, facilitate those around you and help others in their healing journey.
Who would be the most effective person to facilitate this curriculum?
That's a good question. So I would say that there are many who feel unqualified.
I know.
Yeah. So I felt unqualified. I argued with God for a long time. Well, for a while, whenever he showed me this need. And I felt overwhelmed and ill-equipped, and I had lots of arguments in that, and he brought me to a couple of scriptures in that, where I had an understanding for the first time in my life that the very things that were meant to destroy my life wasn't his plan, but it was the enemies. In John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And he tried destroying my life early on, as so many, like statistics are 1 in 3 by the time we're 18 for women and 1 in 6 for men who've experienced some kind of sexual trauma. So everybody knows somebody. And this curriculum can help bring also a greater understanding. If it hasn't personally happened to you, but it happened to someone around you, it can bring a greater understanding how to partner with them in life and help them overcome, so it really is for everyone. But as far as like who would be qualified, it's like, are you willing to be the change that you want for not only your life, but for the others around you? You don't have to have it all together. You just need to be a few steps ahead. And so if you're willing to lead that in your family, in your church, and your pregnancy resource centers use this, I have maternity homes that'll use this. And like I said, sex trafficking, residential facilities they use this as well as simply individuals that just have a passion for people. You don't have to have a title. That's what makes it different from a lot of other things, is being able to navigate it, and you go through it. And unlike a lot of other things that maybe you would come encounter with, like there's a 1-800 number and you can call that, and guess who you get a phone call back? That would be me. So if you have questions or concerns and you think, I don't know that I can do this, have a conversation. Like, I'll help you navigate it. I don't have everything figured out, but I do have a little bit more experience, and I'm willing to walk the journey with you because you're worth it. Everyone is. We don't feel like we are, but you are. You're worth the healing. You're worth the work that it takes to heal. And I think for so many, like they're like, I prayed about it and it just doesn't come. And I'm like, the thing about sexual sin, and especially when it's been forced up on us, is it affects every part of our being, our spirit, body, and our soul. It affects every relationship in our life. I talk about that in the curriculum. And so you have to take ownership for the things that you're responsible for. And you're not responsible for the person that betrayed you or the things that were done to you, but you are responsible for healing. You can't be the victim forever. Well, you could choose to be, but it's miserable. And it's unfulfilling. So if you want the victorious life that Jesus Christ promises us, the joyous life, like you want abundant joy and love and peace, you can have that no matter what's been done to you. You don't have to be defined by the things that's been done. And they're absolutely possible. So it's really just a person with passion for others, who's willing to be prayerful and proceed in that.
Is there a charge for individuals to be a part of this program?
So we have scholarships that we can give out, because I never want cost to be a hindrance to healing. And then the individual sets are, the prices changed, double check. Still affordable. Like the DVD sets are one price, but then like I said, the digital downloadable curriculum is another. I'm looking at it. I think the toolbox that is actually in a stainless steel toolbox is $100. And that's for the facilitator. So that's like the top end of that. Our digital download is $40. And then like the tool set that would be the DVD set and the workbook is $45. So, I mean, you can see that we have a heart for people and that we want to be a blessing in that and never let cost be a hindrance. And when you purchase like the toolkit to be able to be a facilitator, there's a jump drive in there that makes it to where you can print anything that you need for those who you are going to have in group. You never have to come back and buy over and over and over again. So it doesn't have to be an expense. It's overwhelming.
So what are the types of individuals have participated in this program?
Oh my goodness, I've had 70 and 80-year-olds. I've had preteen, tween, and I tell the ones who are on the younger end of that, some of the things that I discuss in the curriculum may not be what they need for the season that they're in, but they've already been exposed to so much, and their innocence has already been stolen, that I would want them to be confident, which is the only thing that a perpetrator fears, is confidence, by the way. And so if we can equip them with what to expect in healthy relationships and not to settle for less than, then I'm all for that. But it's kind of for everybody in between. I've had couples go through it together to bring a greater understanding. It's helped to articulate what some, as they've gone through it, like didn't know how to explain how they processed and how they cope with life. And so for husbands and wives to go through this together brought them closer together, brought them a greater understanding of how their marriage was impacted, whether it was the man or the woman who had been violated. And so there's really, it's not a respecter of person, so to speak. Like it's really something for everyone in that.
You mentioned that your and correct me if I'm wrong, I
Yeah.
think you mentioned that that this curriculum is biblically based.
Yes. So it's non-faith based, as in the aspect of it can be utilized in places that get government funding. But if you get the individual set, the workbook that comes with that does have, on the I am page, it does have the scriptures that back up the I am statements. So in the facilitator kit, it can be utilized one or the other, because that can be interchanged with the scriptures that are on there, can be taken out. But it does line up with the word of God, because really Jesus Christ is where healing comes from. And the reason that God had me set it up this way was he brought me back to a time when I was a teenager and I was really angry at God. I asked that question that so many ask. Well, if you're God and you're a loving God, then, why did I go through this? And I wanted to blame God for the very things that I had went through in life that were hard. And, my dad did things to me that a father should have never done to a daughter. Like he used me for his benefit. He objectified me. And so, God brought me to an understanding that if I, on my website, or if I, in that curriculum, plastered Jesus' name everywhere, or God's name everywhere, I would close the door at the opportunity to be able to bring light into very dark situations for some of those individuals. And so I don't misrepresent. I start building a relationship first, because anyone who has a conversation with me, you'll learn soon that I'm a believer and that I'm going to pray for you and that I love you. But first I have to be able to have that conversation. And so I have people from all over who'll call the 1-800 number, and you don't have to be a believer for me to talk to you or minister to you. I'll meet you right where you're at, so to speak, in your journey of life. But I am going to speak truths into you, but I'm not going to slap you over the head and be like, this is what you have to do in order to have healing. Jesus didn't meet the woman at the well and belittle her or degrade her or argue with her. He knew what she had done and what had been done and what everything else, but he was confident and loving in his conversation, and that's where I think that our approach is really important on how we approach others, that we're loving and we're understanding, but in that loving, you help lead them in their healing journey. You don't expect it. Who we are today didn't happen overnight. It took a lifetime. And for so many, they didn't just have one perpetrator. After that one perpetrator, there became another, and then another, and then another. So they've got a lot of wounds in their soul that have to be healed. And you have to learn to trust, and if God is God and you start asking these questions and you're like, and you believe that he was really the author of your hurts, in order to believe that it wasn't his plans, you have to first kind of go through that journey of experiencing the love of Christ through others, I think would be the best way to put that, to be able to begin trusting Jesus with skin on before you can believe in a father that you can't see.
Could this be like a different approach to reach people for Christ?
Oh, absolutely. I've had several over the years that, they would come to me and, would openly tell me that they weren't a believer. And I would be like, okay. And I loved them just the same as the next person, and I would listen to their hurts, and we would acknowledge that. And I would say, I'm so sorry that you've had to go through that. Because for so many, they've never had anybody say, I'm sorry. And it wasn't that I did those things, but like, I'm willing to take the brunt end of that. I'm willing to say sorry where somebody else isn't going to help bring another step in their healing journey. And for so many, they've never had anybody be like, you're doing a great job. You know, when they're moving along that healing journey, like celebrate the small wins, because the small wins, the little battles end up to a victory in the overall, right? And so celebrate the small wins as we go. You know, if somebody is going along their healing journey and they're no longer coping in the same way that maybe they were coping a month ago when they started, be like, my goodness, look, you're not even the person that when we first met a month ago, you know? And I think that it's important to speak life in truth and in love. And so with that, you know, do we see people come to Christ? Absolutely. Because they're experiencing the unconditional love for the first time in their life. For so many, like, you know, my dad, he would tell me he loved me, but all the while by raping me, right? And he wasn't violent. Like, a lot of people think that abuse or trauma or rape always has to be like violent. No, most of the times it's methodical and they're subtle, and they cross boundaries. To the point that, like, you know, children look to the adults in their life to establish truth. And so even though as a young child, like, you don't like what's going on, you figure that that must be the normal thing because these are the adults who are supposed to take care of you in some form or fashion, you know? And so as you begin to relearn what really love is, and that love isn't pain, love isn't betrayal, love doesn't use, abuse, and objectify. And so when you start learning what love really is, it's a great segue into like learning about Jesus Christ and the sacrifices that he made, because the picture that Jesus Christ makes is he's selfless, but perpetrators are selfish, you know? So you start contrasting between the ones who used and abused to the ones who, you know, start seeing the fruit of Christ in their life. And, you know, I often when I get asked, well, why would you take time out of your schedule? You know, you're a mom and you're a wife and you're this, and because you're valuable, because you're worth it, you know? And so it's, our words matter in that aspect. You know, do we have to have boundaries when we're ministering to others? Absolutely. Do I have to make my home, which is my first mission field, a priority? Absolutely. Have I always got it right? No. You know, it's a learning curve. I've had to reset a couple of times and be like, I need to, you know, block off some time to schedule my family time, so to speak. I'll put blocks in my calendar. I'm like, I'm not available during this time. I'm already booked. Whether that's for my family, that's okay. You know, we can't miss the mark at home by ministering to others, and making them more of a priority. Because I will tell my kids that if I don't get it right at home, I didn't get it right, period. No matter how many people I've helped.
I brought that up because we're living in a time in which Christianity is already under scrutiny as it is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that people, you know, they see Christianity as a religion that is being used to oppress people.
Mm,
You know, I get,
yeah.
I hear this all the time.
Yeah.
This makes, our job as Christians a lot difficult.
Well, I just had a conversation. I'm a small group leader for ninth grade girls. And I literally just had this conversation Wednesday night when we were in group. And I said, there's so many people wearing the Christian name tag that it makes it really hard when you're wanting to talk to others about Christ and what Christ is doing in your life. And one of the girls in our group was like, oh my goodness, Miss Amber, I love that you put it as a name tag. Because when you don't know somebody and you read their name tag, well, you shouldn't have to say that you're a Christian for somebody to know that you're a Christian. You should be known by the way that you walk it out. But for those who are wearing the name tag, they put it on when it's convenient. They put it on when they want the benefits of being a Christian, but the fruit is lacking in there. Mm-hmm. And so I think that for those who are not in an authentic relationship with Christ, because I really don't like religion. I don't like it at all. It's not of God, but a relationship, that's all about God. He is a relational God. And he cares about our relationship with him. And he wants to have an intimate relationship where we call him Abba Father, where he's our heavenly Father. And for me, that was hard because father was one of those things that, like, I didn't need a father. I already had one of those. And I know what that meant in my life. And I didn't need any more of that hurt. But like, it was really through the unconditional love of others who then I came to know as loving Jesus, that brought me to that knowledge and understanding. And so, God didn't call us to do all these things that I see so many others who are wearing the name tag Christian. He didn't call us to judge, to degrade, to belittle, to hate. Like, he didn't call us to do, that's not the character of Christ. And so he called us to love. He called us to minister. He called us to sacrifice. He called us to be bold and to speak truth and in love. And he called us to honor him in every area of our life, not just the areas that public people see, And so when authentic relationships are in place, then you can see the fruit of that through the way people talk to people, treat people. Is it loving, or are they just saying that they're a Christian because they've been going through the motions? And are they deceived in that? Do they really believe they have a relationship, but yet there's never been any transformation in their life? And so, I can see where it causes confusion, but we know who the author of confusion is. That's not our father. It's the father of lies. So if confusion can be brought in to then put a bad taste in people's mouth, like, I don't need any of that. Like, I've seen y'all a bunch of hypocrites. Are there hypocrites in the pew? Absolutely. In every church. There's not a church, a denomination that doesn't have them sitting in the pews. But guess what? They need Jesus just as much as the next person. And I hope that they find that. But I'm not going to let those around me who are being deceitful taint my walk. Like, I'm going to be authentic to the best of my ability. I'm going to be approachable and relatable and represent Christ to the best of my ability in all that I do.
I know, because they make it seems like Christian is the easiest thing to become, and it is not.
No,
we're going to be talked about. We're going to be persecuted. We're going to be ridiculed. We're going to be laughed at.
Yeah.
We're going to be cut off of some things. You might lose family members. Might friends. But people just make it seem like, oh, it's the easiest thing to do. No, it's not. It is difficult. We're going to go through some things.
Absolutely. Well, when God talks about it in his word, several different places, but he says, when you suffer well. Like, it didn't say if, it's these when others rise up against you, lift your head to me, because he's the one that we look to, and I think we fool ourselves, and we've been, I think it's a westernized Christianity is honestly a lot of the confusion that happens where we live at, is we've turned it and we read it from the American version. Well, America's I'm not mentioned in there. And so, like, when we're looking at it, we need to look through it through God's lens, not ours, and we can take hope, when it talks about in John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come, meaning Christ has come so that we can have life and have it more abundantly. He didn't mean more stuff, but how many westernized Christianity version is speaking that? He meant we can have more love and more joy and more peace and more confidence in him and who we are in him. And in all of that, that's how we withstand the plans of the enemy, is knowing and standing on his truths and his promises. But when we've been so broken by the plans of the enemy, and we've been betrayed and used and abused, it's hard to see God's truth. So it really takes others coming alongside and linking arms with you and being able to speak life in love, to be able to encourage healing journeys that need to happen all throughout our nation and really the world.
How do we use our trauma and pain to glorify God.
Hmm. I remember God asking me when I took that season that I was arguing with him. Um, and he brought me to Romans 8:28, and it's really my life verse. It's what I live out every day. And it says, God can use all things for our good and for his glory, for those who are called to serve him. And I remember him asking me, are you willing to give it to me?
Somebody had to fuck over you.
And I said, what, this dark, damage, ugly stuff that ain't nobody wanting to talk about? Like, that skeleton in the closet that my mom told me we ain't ever going to talk about again? You mean that stuff? So how can it be used for our good and for our glory? Like, we first have to be willing to hand it over to him. We have to allow his light to come into those dark places that we've kept secret or hidden. I know couples who have been married for years, and one of the, whether it be the husband or the wife, would come and talk to me. And if we meet with couples, if I'm going to meet with a husband or wife, my husband's here as well. But like, they've been married sometimes 50 years, and their spouse never knew that they had been molested or raped or had trauma. So they carried that secret around, like that dark place inside of them, because they were so full of shame and guilt. And in that, like, you wouldn't believe the generations that came behind them. And oftentimes it'll be the daughter and it'll be the granddaughter, or whoever else. And I've seen it in family after family after family. And so I think healing is stunning and gorgeous at any age, but I love seeing older generations being able to break free from their silence. And it's not that you have to go out and tell everybody. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that those who are in your inner circle, those who are trustworthy and are honorable, that have pure motives and pure intent in your life, being able them to be vulnerable with them. And if you need somebody to talk to, like, there's the 1-800, and it's 1-844, the number 2, try hope. It's so easy. Like, you can call that, and I'll listen and I'll believe, and I can help you navigate what's next in your journey. A lot of people, you just don't know what the first step needs to be. And then what do I do for the next step? I'm afraid of, what is my family going to say? Or I don't want to be the one to break my family apart, or I don't want my kids to think less of me, or, there's all kinds of things that are based out of fear. But it also says in God's word, like, he didn't give me that spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And so those are truths that I've had to step into and really apply to my life as I've navigated my own healing journey, and then led others on theirs as well.
You mentioned something about arguing, with God. At, at, at
Mm.
at what place in your life have you come to the realization that what you're doing now, this is what God wanted me to do?
Yeah, so I was 32 in 2010, and that's where, like, I knew I needed help, but I wasn't looking to be the help. And I had went to a place that caters to women. They're a pregnancy resource center, and I had volunteered there for quite a while. I did childcare. I owned my own daycare at this point in time in my life, in a rural place that had never had childcare before. So I opened up the first childcare facility in our town. And so I took that talent and went to this pregnancy resource center that was about 45 minutes away. And I remember thinking, this is a place that caters to women. And if there is any resource, then they would know about it. And so I worked up the courage again to finally ask for help. And I remember asking that director, do you know of anything for women who have been sexually abused? And she said 4. And I raised my hand and I bowed my head because I was so full of guilt and shame. I couldn't even look her in the eyes. And she said, Amber, I don't know of anything. And I remember just being heartbroken all over again. I figured that this was going to be the moment, kind of like when I was 11 and I was telling my mom, like, this was going to be the moment that, like, healing was going to come and help was going to be there. But she came to me a couple hours later and she put a pile of curriculum, like VHS tapes and a binder, in my hands, and asked me to pray about teaching a class. And I was a people pleaser. Thank you, Lord, for delivering me from that. But at that point in time, I looked at her and I was grinning and I'm shaking my head up and down. But on the inside, I'm thinking, are you crazy? Like, I'm a hot mess. I can't help anyone. And that's really where I did take that curriculum, and I stepped away and I prayed about it for 2 weeks, and every argument that I had, like, God had the answer for it. And so, he had to bring me to the understanding that although this wasn't my plan, like, this was where he was really going to make beauty out of ashes. And, and here I am 12 years later, and, I've seen the impact of my testimony and my healing, not only in my family or in my community, but around the world. And so when he says, I can use all things, like, he means it. Like, there's not anything too broken or too dark or too damaged, but it's, are we willing to give it to him so that it can be used for our good and for his glory? And so it's not me that brings healing to all of these people. Like, it's Jesus Christ that has given me these things that I get to pass on. I just get to be the hands and feet that reach out, that they can feel that tangible evidence of what God has done. And so I'm thankful for that opportunity. But it was a journey to get me here. I would put stipulations on, like, well, Lord, okay, I'll do a conference, but I don't want any more than this amount of people. There are only wanted women when I first started doing conferences, and finally I was like, oh, I don't have a comfort zone. He's like, really? And so he would push me a little bit more, but all in love, to grow my confidence in him and be able to be the voice for those who haven't used their voices yet, to be able to, like I said, speak life and truth, but bring light into dark situations, because then they can't be dark anymore.
So I know you got the DVDs and you got the digital curriculum. Do you also do in-person
I do.
classes?
Yeah, I do. I'll have individuals. I can Zoom, like, with others individuals as well, or FaceTime. I've set that up as well if we need to kind of touch base along the way. If they need somebody that they're not going to be in a group that is facilitated, but they just need a little bit of extra accountability, I do that as well.
So do you have other people that facilitate the curriculum besides yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I have facilitators around the nation that have got that. Some are done at colleges, pregnancy resource centers, churches. Like I said, the sex trafficking, there's a couple of different residential facilities that I know, I can think of off the top of my head, that are utilizing that right now. So there's groups all around that have been facilitated as needs have arose, and they've been aware of it.
I know some people, would say, okay, I've been through this ordeal, and then, God is going to use this as a testimony.
Mhm.
Um, but oftentimes, do you see this as a trigger for, your own experience, or, would you say that, God has delivered me and I'm able to, move forward?
So I use an analogy in the curriculum, and it's called wounds versus scars. And I think for many, we're walking around with these wounds in our soul, and we get triggered, and then it's like that crusty scab gets pulled off, and we're gushing blood, and we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to heal it. So we just put a Band-Aid on it. We say, I'm fine, you're fine, everything's fine. When you ask that person, you're like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm fine. I am fine. Yeah, that was me, queen of I'm fine. But when you come to the point that you choose to heal those wounds, they become scars. It doesn't mean they didn't happen. It means that when you bring that wound to the point that you've healed it and it's a scar now, it doesn't evoke the same emotion. It doesn't have that same emotional response every time something's brought up. And so, like, I'm no longer triggered. I can talk to anyone and everyone, and it doesn't bring me back to a place in my own journey. And I talk about tools that are needed, because I'm most definitely not the beginning and the end of everything, but things that can come alongside depending on what your trauma was. Mine was over a decade, of trauma. And so being able to work through that and overcoming that is going to look, everybody recipe for restoration is going to look a little bit differently. Like we can all have the same tools laid out there, but how you apply those tools to your journey may look a little bit differently. But I promise you the things that have been laid out there are applicable, and you get to pick that up and apply that to the relationships around you, to where you can start having authentic relationships. Because for many, you have walls in those relationships, and you built those walls thinking you were protecting yourself, but really you were creating a prison because it was isolating. Because we're afraid in that aspect. When you're using that coping skill, you're using it to try to protect, but in that moment you're isolating, which further brings loneliness and a place of defeat still. So you have to kind of tear down those walls, have somebody who's trustworthy in your life that you can share your journey with, and I've been that for many people.
Or what about your family? Have you come to terms with your family?
So my dad has not been, like I said, my mom passed away in 2010 from cancer. And I will say, I always want to honor my mom in the fact that my mom did the best she could with what she had. My mom had never healed from her abuse from a family member, and it wasn't her parents, it was somebody else, extended family. Excuse me, but she had never healed from that. So she couldn't lead the way for me to heal. She didn't know how to do that. And so, after her passing, and I get to kind of look back on that, and we had to put boundaries in place where my dad no longer has contact with our children, because he's not a changed man. And he showed that. And so when putting boundaries in place and being able to navigate a safe place for our children, our home should be our sanctuary. Our kids can be themselves and not have to worry about there being a threat in that. And so that really motivated us to do whatever it took to be able to create that. And that included even getting a protection order. But I remember having to explain to our older daughter. So our oldest daughter was 11 at the time that I started my healing journey, and the next one was 10. And I remember explaining to them, like soon after he wasn't coming around anymore, that, he was never the father that he should have been to me, and that he did things to me that only should happen between a husband and wife, because I didn't want to take their innocence away, but I wanted to bring an understanding that boundaries had been crossed and that it wasn't healthy for him to be part of our lives. And I remember my third daughter, who was 8 at the time that this was all going on, super sweet disposition. And I remember it being almost a year that went by, and over that year she got really angry, and she had even bit herself, and I was like, this is not her nature. And she was having a really hard time because she didn't understand why my dad wasn't allowed to be around anymore, because they had already, grieved the loss of my mother, who was a phenomenal grandmother, by the way. Like, she rocked it as a grandmother. She loved my kids very well. And so whenever he was no longer around, she didn't understand that, but I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want the innocence to be lost. Like, I really struggled with that. And so I remember being the following summer in 2011. And I had been praying, like, Lord, how do I tell her? Because I don't want it to crush her. And I had all 3 of the older girls with me, and we were off to do a grocery shopping trip for our family. And I remember sitting outside a grocery store, and God's like, now. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh, we're getting ready to go in. And we were in a minivan, and I looked back and I named her, and I said, I need to talk to you for a minute. And she's like, okay. And I said, my dad, and I basically had said the same thing that I had said to the older 2. And I had prepared myself for this sobbing mess, because she's such a sweet, spirit, and she's very sensitive soul, and all the good attributes that come to that. And instead, her shoulders went back, and she was like, that's why. And she started naming off all of these ways that my mother had protected she understood actions that my mom had did to protect them from even an opportunity of my dad ever being inappropriate with them. And then we never allowed like any sleepovers with my parents, but I did allow my mom to be grandmother to my children. And so they would get to go to grandma's for the day or go to the zoo with them and whatnot. But I got to see confidence come out of my child that day. And that was part of my healing process, because where my mom was unable to protect me, like she made sure that she was the protector for them. And people would ask me, why would I even have a relationship with my parents? Or why would I allow my parents to be grandparents to our children if my dad, they want to question always like if happened, if all these things are true. And I would propose, I'm like, who wants to be an orphan? And as dysfunctional as my family was and is, I didn't want to be an orphan, and I really wanted my mom to be part of my life. And it was kind of a package deal. So in order to have my mom in my life, I had to allow him to be part. But before we had our oldest daughter, my husband and I went to my parents and we put boundaries in place. We said, he's never to be left alone with her. He's never allowed to change a diaper. Was one more, never be left alone, never to change a diaper. And there's never going to be a sleepover. And so, these are things that I didn't ever waver on, no matter how many kids we had, whether it was the first or the sixth, which is what we still had whenever my mom was alive. And so those boundaries still stood in place. And so we did our best, I felt like, to protect our children. And as far as I know, there was never any inappropriateness when it came to our children. But I know that I am not my dad's first, nor my dad's last of who he victimized and took advantage of. And that's heartbreaking. But I believe it's a lie that a lot of other people believe as well. When it's somebody in our family, we would think that there was no way that they would do that to anybody else. But I will tell you, often we're just one of many. And it takes sometimes using your voice to speak out, to be able to bring light into those dark situations, to be the courage to encourage others to heal as well.
Well, I think that's a great time to end it on this note here. Certainly intriguing and inspiring, story that you allow God to use you in, what we consider to be a mess
Mm-hmm.
around. And, he turned around and so many people are being helped because of, what you thought was a mess.
Absolutely.
Now, how can people, so if they want to know more about you and this curriculum, how
Yeah.
would people be able to reach you?
So Amber at the number 2tryhope.com is my email. Super easy to remember that. And the website is the number 2tryhope.com. So you can check me out there. But if you look on social media, you can find the nonprofit page at the 2tryhope, or Amber McCutcheon. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and you're welcome to find me there. And if you send me a message, if you'll PM me or DM me, I will respond to you. And I love to be kind of the icebreaker in that, like, you may not know what your next step is, but if you're willing to trust me, like, I promise that I'll believe you, and I can maybe help you navigate whatever that next step is, or that first step is on your healing journey.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, and best wishes on your ministry. And we'll continue to pray for the people that you encounter, that they will receive the healing gift of God.
Amen.
And that's going to wrap up this edition of the Works. I hope that this is Keith Williams. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.